Welcome to the first OWASP Ottawa meetup of 2026. Hooray! Oh, really lively room. There it is. My name is Adam. I am an organizer with OWASP Ottawa, and the room is full of some very helpful organizers. These events and our chapter would not continue operating if it wasn't for the volunteer support that we get, as well as the support from some of our chapter sponsors, which we'll talk about in a sec. If you are an OWASP Ottawa organizer, can you raise your hand? Please thank these folks for keeping things running. And if you would like to join us as an organizer, or if you have a talk that you would like to present, or if you just want to get to know us, you can find us on Slack. For at least the next 10 days or so, you can get to our Slack by going to owasp.org/Ottawa. And on that page, you should see many links to many places, including our Slack community. And that Slack community is a growing community. It's connections all throughout the Ottawa industry, and is a really great place to connect, and you can find all of us organizers and the rest of the community there. There are some changes coming. Let me ask the question that I usually ask. How did you find us today? If you found us on Meetup, can you put up your hand? Okay, that's less than the last couple of months, and more than it will be next month, because as of next month, you're not going to find us on Meetup any longer. But you will find us in our Slack community, you will find us on LinkedIn, and you will find us eventually back at owasp.org/Ottawa. I say eventually because the website is going through a bit of a transition. It should be smoothly transitioned at the end of the month, but you know how these things go. So if you want to stay connected, join our Slack community. If you've got your phone, you've got your computer, you can do that right now, and we'd love to see you over there. A big thank you to Software Secured, a boutique pen testing company that is based here in Ottawa and has brought us our pizza this evening. So thank you very much to the Software Secured team. Have I missed other important announcements? I think that's enough to get rocking. Do you want to say anything, Garth? Oh, yes. How to find us again. If you don't get LinkedIn or our Slack group, you should find us again the third Wednesday of next month, and every month, unless it's not happening. But you'll typically find us here or on the 5th floor, depending on the day. Follow our signs to get to the room. To that point, a big thank you to our partners who provide us with the space, the University of Ottawa and the IBM Cyber Range, a fantastic space on the 5th floor. So thanks to the University of Ottawa and the IBM team. Who likes cookies? Keep your hand up if you would trust a cookie you baked. Okay. Keep your hand up if you would trust a cookie that was baked by some random stranger. Okay, I like your confidence. Keep your hand up if you would trust a cookie that was baked by somebody who definitely was out to get you. Yeah, no more hands. Vincent Dragnea is with us this week. He is with Forward Security, another fantastic offensive security team. And he's going to tell us today about SameSite cookies and some interesting discoveries that I believe you have made against this, research against this? All right, fantastic. Well, without further ado, here is Vincent.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. And thank you all to all the organizers and sponsors for making this possible. Yeah, so this talk is SameSite or not, because we're going to be looking at bypassing SameSite cookie protections in modern browsers. So a little brief introduction. My name is Vincent Dragnea. I'm a security researcher and software developer. I like making things, and I also like breaking things. And I currently work as an application security consultant at Forward Security. So let's dive right in. The purpose of this talk is to dive into some interesting behavior about how browsers handle same-site cookies, and specifically how they can be attached to unexpected GET requests. I will be demoing a couple of interesting behaviors, and this research actually led to a CVE logged against Google Chrome, for which I was awarded a bounty this past summer. It's a pretty narrow scope, the stuff we're talking about today, but the concepts apply to wider areas of web application security, and hopefully everyone can walk away from this having learned something new. So before we get started, I'll cover some basic information that's going to be pretty important to understand what's going on. And that's what is an HTTP request, what are cookies, and what is the same site attribute for a cookie. So at a very high level, when your browser loads a website, it sends an HTTP request to the server hosting that website to check what that website is supposed to be. And that request looks like this. On the left is the request that your browser sends out, and the server response is on the right. And don't worry if you can't read all of the details there, because I'll explain the important parts. The request starts with a method. In this case, it's get. And then it specifies the path for the resource it's requesting. The next lines are called headers, where the request can include all sorts of additional data. Browsers populate most of this automatically, and we don't need to worry about those headers for now. And then the response displays the status for that response on the first line, and then also includes several lines of response headers. After the headers, there's an empty line, and then the response body. This is the content that's being returned for this request. So for a browser, that's the HTML that will be rendered and displayed to the user. Whoa, okay, wait, can you hear me when I'm talking this way, or did I have to lean over? Okay, good. All right, so that was a GET request, and there are other HTTP methods or verbs as well. So another common method is POST, which can be used to send data to a server. In this example, this is a login request to a website. And here the request has several lines of headers, but then there's a blank line followed by some data, because the request can also include a body to send larger chunks of data to a server. And the data here is a user's credentials. You have their username and password. And the server response, in this case, includes a set cookie header. And this is the server telling your browser to store a cookie. And then when your browser sends future requests to that site, it automatically includes the cookie in the request header. You can see there's a highlighted line there that says cookie, demo auth, and then some session token value. So yeah. Cookies are a massive part of modern web applications. Lots of websites don't even work without them, and they're especially important for security features like authentication and handling that smoothly in a browser. So how can we make sure that they're being used securely? Well, when the server sets a cookie, it can specify certain attributes for how that cookie is meant to be used. For example, the HTTP only attribute prevents JavaScript from being able to read the cookie. This means that the cookie is only handled by the browser automatically. So if there is a JavaScript execution vulnerability in the website or cross-site scripting, then the malicious script can't access the cookie value directly. It can still do all sorts of dangerous stuff, but we don't need to worry about that for now. The secure attribute ensures that the cookie is only sent over secure channels, so it won't be attached to plain text HTTP requests, only HTTPS. And this one is actually more important than some people realize, because if a user logs into a site and the cookie is set without this attribute, then the cookie can be exposed in plain text if that user later accidentally navigates to the site without HTTPS. It's unlikely that attackers will be able to intercept that kind of traffic on your home network, but if you are on public networks, that could compromise your session cookie and someone listening on that network might be able to use your credential or use your session token to send authenticated requests to that site. So there are some other attributes, but the main one we're going to focus on today is the SameSite attribute. And this tells the browser when it should send the cookie with cross-site requests. So there are three main settings for this attribute. None tells the browser to send the cookie with all requests to the site, no matter where they came from. Lax is the default setting for most browsers currently. So if a cookie doesn't specify a SameSite attribute, it will usually be assigned as lax. And it's not as bad as it sounds, but it can still be attached to certain requests originating on another site. For example, if the browser is redirected to another page, that will include a lax SameSite cookie. And finally, strict is the value we're going to focus on today, which essentially means that the cookie should not be included on any requests originating from another site. And we're going to look at some ways that that might not always be true. So how can cookies be dangerous? Why do you need to worry about the SameSite attribute? Well, there's a class of vulnerabilities called cross-site request forgery, or CSRF. And essentially the risk is that a victim user logs into your site and you set a cookie with their session token to authenticate them. Then that user visits a malicious site, which sends a request to your site in that user's browser. And and then their browser automatically attaches their cookie to that request and authenticates it. So as far as your site can tell, the real user sent that request and you process it normally. And this can let the attacker perform actions as the victim user and can be really dangerous depending on the application that is compromised. So so just to set the stage a little bit, there are some limitations to the techniques we're discussing today. So I'm going to go over those now. So the focus will be on how SameSite equals strict cookies can be attached to GET requests that don't originate on the same site. In order for that to have an impact, the website must be insecurely configured. GET requests are considered safe, which means that they're not supposed to handle state-changing requests. But it's a relatively common misconfiguration to have an endpoint that accidentally responds to GET, even if it's not meant to. So now that we should have enough background information here, I'm going to walk through some live demos with an example application to show how this can be dangerous. So the demo application I built is a banking website that lets users log in and view their balance and send funds to other users. After logging in, the session token is stored in a cookie. I set up two identical versions of the application. One uses SameSite equals strict for the cookie, and the other doesn't, so I can demonstrate the difference. And earlier I mentioned the concept of safe HTTP methods, and this misconfiguration is actually critical to the exploits we're discussing today. Essentially, a server should not process state-changing requests, meaning a request that modifies the state or data on the server, with a GET request. Browsers have additional protections in place for requests that use unsafe methods, such as post or put. So that's why safe methods can be dangerous if they're implemented improperly. In the case of our banking application, the endpoint that processes a money transfer is meant to respond to post requests, but due to a misconfiguration, it also processes data in GET requests. To show how this type of vulnerability can be identified, I'm going to use a proxy tool called Burp Suite, which can intercept and modify HTTP traffic that my browser sends out. So I have that ideally all set up here. So this is our application. I'll just give you a quick tour. We're going to log in as Alice and use her super secret password. And then it says, welcome Alice, and you can transfer money or log out. The other user is called Bob, and we will send Bob $1. Just to show you what that looks like. You successfully sent $1 to Bob. So, okay, right. Testing for this misconfiguration is pretty easy in Burp Suite. If we identify the post request to initiate the transfer, then we can use the repeater tool to modify and resend the request. So if we send that over here, we can edit this request and resend it to make some changes and see how the server responds. In this case, Burp is actually has a good tool to modify the request method. So To change the method, you can just right-click and select Change Request Method, and it'll automatically modify that, taking that, that data out of the request body and encoding it as URL parameters in the URL for a GET request. And we can see that if we send this request, and sorry, I had to move that over so I could see this, I can actually render what that response looks like in Burp Suite. And it shouldn't take that long, but there we go. So that was a successful response to that request, even though we changed it to a GET request. That's really sketchy. OK. Sorry, my laptop keeps sliding off the podium here. I'll just keep a hand right there. OK, yeah, where were we? So yeah, other proxies might have different ways to do this, or you can just manually modify the request. But now when we send the GET request, we see that the response confirms that the transfer was processed. So now that we've identified this vulnerability in the website, how is it dangerous? I mean, it doesn't really look that dangerous on its own. But our demo application is set up with SameSite set to strict or lax. So we can compare how the two versions handle redirects from another site. So to do that, that's the wrong thing. OK. So first, I'm going to log into the version that is, so this, on port 5001, I'm serving the version that doesn't set a SameSite attribute. So this one is using SameSite lax when you log in. So I'm just going to log in there to have that ready. Where am I? Yeah, so when a user is redirected from an external site, the browser sends a GET request. And SameSite lax rules allow the cookie to be attached to that request, even though it comes from a different site. So I set up a simple attack page that simulates a phishing website that targets our vulnerable application. This is all hosted locally on my laptop, but we can simulate different domains by accessing the banking app at localhost and the simulated phishing page at 127.0.0.1. Because cookies are not actually scoped by port. That's not what I'm trying to do. Yeah. OK. Yeah, so even though these websites both resolve to my laptop, the browser sees localhost and 127.0.0.1 as different sites. So we can simulate cross-site behavior between them. So let's start with the version that uses SameSite lax. We logged into that application on port 5001. And then if our user visits this malicious website, it can redirect them to the vulnerable endpoint, which was that URL that we identified with those URL parameters encoded to include the recipient for the transfer and the amount that you're sending. I have a button built into this website to trigger this for the demo, but in a real malicious page, this could be triggered automatically as soon as the page loads. So you wouldn't actually know this is happening until it's too late if you do visit a malicious site that is exploiting this type of vulnerability. So if we trigger the attack for this version of the application, then we are redirected to the banking application. And we see that their transfer was successful. All our user did was visit another website, and now Bob has 10 of their dollars. And this is cross-site request forgery, or CSRF, where that external site can exploit your user's session to perform an authenticated action. So now, if we log into the version that sets SameSite equals strict on the cookie when that is set during the login process, and then we try to attack that site. So if we go back here and attack port 5000, which is the one serving with SameSite equals strict, yeah, we can see that the request is not authenticated, and that's expected because the cookie was not attached to that request since it originated on a different site. So that's great. We've solved CSRF, right? Everyone can go home. That's it. Well, let's look at some ways that this setup can actually still be dangerous, even with SameSite equals strict. So back to the slides. So there's a great PortSwigger article about bypassing SameSite cookies. And it goes over some well-known bypass methods that I won't cover too in-depth, but the main method there involves abusing an internal redirect in the vulnerable website. Lots of websites have some sort of internal redirect functionality where you can be redirected back to a page you were looking at after you log in, or some other similar functionality. And in the right circumstances, a malicious website can redirect a user to that redirect page. And then when the redirect page sends you to the vulnerable endpoint, that is an internal redirect within the site. And actually, the browser actually attaches the SameSite cookie for that request. There's a lot of good research on that topic. And I was also trying to find methods that didn't require that additional level of functionality in the vulnerable site. So let's get started on the kind of more interesting things I have to talk about today. The first interesting limitation of SameSite Strict cookies that I noticed is actually part of their intentional design, but it sets the groundwork for the other methods we're going to be discussing today. When you navigate to a link by typing it into the address bar of the browser, that GET request to load the page includes SameSite Strict cookies. This is intended behavior because if your user is logged in and they visit your website intentionally, you want them to see the authenticated page. And additionally, GET requests are considered safe, which means that a website should not process any state-changing requests with GET, specifically for these reasons. But let's see how this can be dangerous for our application. So we're going to go back to our website. I guess I can just copy that URL. So no matter what page you're on, if you just, let's first make sure we're logged into our application, which we are. This is the version that sets the cookie with SameSite equals strict. And so, actually, right, yeah, I can, sorry, one second. I had this all planned out. I forgot to open that. OK, so this is just a link to the vulnerable application from another site. So if we click on that link, we can see that doesn't include the cookie. It's not supposed to because that came from a different site. But if your user manually types that in and hits enter, then it actually does process that because that's intentional. That's how same-site cookies are meant to be handled. But this really illustrates the point that even if none of the rest of the stuff that we were talking about today existed, this is still a dangerous behavior because just on its own, it could be exploited in this way. And yeah, so sorry, I lost my place here. Yeah, so this method requires a bit more user interaction since the victim has to copy a link and enter it into their browser. But there are other ways you could convince a user to do this. For example, if you present a user with a link, but you don't make it clickable, then to visit that link, the user would have to copy it into their browser. It's not like, it's a bit janky. I think we can find some more interesting methods, but this is kind of just the groundwork for the rest of the methods. So moving on to limitation number 2. When your system opens a URL in the default browser, it actually includes same-site cookies. So I started looking at what happens when your system opens the default browser to a web page, and it turns out it treats it the same way as typing the URL into the address bar. So I'll demo this one quickly as well. I actually have to use my default browser for this, otherwise it won't work. So if we just log in my default browser, then we can see that we're logged in. And if we come over here in the terminal and just open that URL, which is that malicious payload, that malicious endpoint where we identified we can send the transfer with a GET request, then when this opens, it also was successfully processed as a transfer. So what does this mean? I mean, this kind of seems like it would be even harder to exploit than the first method, but turns out the system also opens the default browser when the user clicks on a link from another application. That can happen in an email or a messaging client like Slack, or in a document viewer, like for a PDF. So I have a PDF document here that I can open, and we can see here, this is just our simulated user is just logged into their application. They receive a PDF document that has totally innocent link in it, and when they click it, that actually processes with the same site cookie. So yeah, so while same site cookies are blocked on requests originating on another site, they can actually still be attached to requests that originate outside the context of the browser entirely. And this is getting a little more interesting. This is still technically not cross-site because it originates in a different application, but we're getting a little closer to what I wanted to kind of be able to exploit here. And so let's see if we can find a way to trigger this type of behavior from within the browser on a different site instead of just using a completely different application to begin with. So after identifying this behavior in a PDF viewer, I started looking at the PDF viewer built into the browser as well, specifically the Google Chrome PDF viewer. I figured if the browser handled links differently in this viewer, then it might compromise the same site protections. And so I'm just going to dive right into the demo on this one as well. But sorry, one sec. Should probably just have these all prepared ahead of time. OK. So first, we make sure our user is logged into the application, which she still is. And then we're going to be using an older version of Chromium for this, because the vulnerability I reported was fixed back in August. But if we open our phishing site to a page that is serving a PDF document, then Chrome displays it in the built-in viewer. And then I need a mouse for this part, because there's actually a weird little behavior here, which was what I reported. So if we click on the link to the application from this PDF, we see it does nothing. It's not supposed to, because that's not a same site request. But if we right-click on that link and then click open a new tab and then go over there, it still does nothing. But bear with me. If we middle-click on the link and then go over there, it successfully attaches the same site cookie.
Oh, well, it's Tuesday already.
Exactly, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so we can actually send a request from another site that includes the same site cookie. And this can even be hidden on a page. Like, it looks kind of weird if you see it. Maybe you're aware of this vulnerability and before it's been patched. So you're not going to click on any links in a PDF document, but you can actually style an iframe to render in a page containing a link to the vulnerable application. And so in this case, that's just an iframe that has that link. You could style it to look a little more sneaky than this, but if you middle click on that, then it successfully sends that transfer. So that's like a full cross-site originating request that includes the same site cookie. And yeah, so this still requires some pretty specific user input. I think you can actually also control click or command click on a Mac. That also does work if you don't have a mouse with a middle click handy. Well, you could before they fixed it. So this still requires some pretty specific user input, but it does break the security mechanism of same-site cookies. Other browsers like Firefox did not do this, and when I reported this to Google's Chrome vulnerability reward program, they actually awarded me a bounty for it and issued CVE 2025-8581 when they released the fix. And that's been patched now, but I still wanted to find a method that could be triggered automatically from a malicious site, because it's not very reliable to tell a user, like, hey, middle click this link, don't worry, it's totally safe.
That's a cat picture.
Yeah, that's true, that could work. So I started looking at application protocols or URI schemes. You might see these in a link sometimes where it starts with an application name like Slack : or Spotify : and the system can be configured to open those links using that application. The browser can follow links which open that application and then do something. So I started looking for a common application protocol that can open the default browser to a specified URL. If we find one, then our malicious site can redirect to the application, and then when that application opens the default browser, it includes the same site cookie. because of that limitation too that we discussed earlier, where the default browser always does that. So I looked through documentation for a few of these application protocols until I found, I was on the wrong slide that whole time. That's what you should have been looking at earlier. Until I found the Steam protocol, or the Steam browser protocol. So this is some functionality exposed by Steam, the PC gaming platform. The Steam client can be opened from a URL with certain basic commands. It's mostly related to opening their store to a specific page or interacting with your library, but there was one command that did exactly what I was looking for, which was open URL. The open URL command says it opens a URL in the system's default web browser, which was exactly what I was trying to do. So I need to go back to my default browser again here. We're going to make sure we're still logged in, which we are. And then /Steam. So, OK. So we're going to go back to our malicious phishing site, which displays a link to open the Steam application and then open the vulnerable website in the system browser using their open URL functionality. And so you can see here we're logged into our application. Let's say Alice goes and visits some other malicious site. And if we click this link, we actually do run into one last hurdle that I couldn't quite find a way around, but the browser actually requests your permission to open a separate application. You can have this set to always use that application to open links, and someone might not necessarily know that's a malicious thing either. I mean, if it's something that they are aware of and that they regularly use, they might think nothing of it if they're just opening the Steam store to a game page or something. But if we click open link, then that very quickly processes, but it opens the Steam client quickly, which then redirects you back to the browser, to that URL, and includes the SameSite cookie. And so the transfer is processed, and yet again, Bob gains $1. So yeah, and this redirect to the Steam protocol can actually also be triggered automatically, so you don't have to do anything manually there. Your user could just visit a malicious site that triggers the redirect automatically, and if they either have Steam set to automatically open Steam links, or if they just click allow, then it automatically goes and triggers that transfer, because we had our vulnerability in the application where we were accepting GET requests when we shouldn't be doing unsafe actions with a GET request. And then I also want to note that the Steam application can be configured to always open links. And so I can show, if you do have that setting enabled, then it would just look like this. You visit you visit a website, and then it opens that malicious page with the SameSite cookie. So fully cross-site requests that includes SameSite equals strict cookies, with a little bit of shenanigans in the middle. But yeah, this way it can be triggered without any user interaction beyond just visiting the malicious site. So yeah, turning to the presentation, there are some caveats to the methods that I identified. We can only send GET requests, which is why that misconfiguration in the transfer endpoint was so important here. The victim is also required to have Steam installed. It's a popular application, but that's not guaranteed. Although there might be other applications that expose similar functionality through a custom protocol. And finally, the browser requests the user's permission to open Steam. That might already be allowed, but again, that's not a guarantee. The problem with phishing attacks, though, is that they don't need to be they don't need to have a particularly high success rate to be effective. If someone identifies a vulnerability like this in a major website, they can send malicious links to thousands of people, and it only has to work once. And then I also, want to share this screenshot of a permission dialog I got on my phone a few months ago. It's not related to SameSite cookies, but I received this permission request while setting something up on my Google account. The dialog just says, allow myaccount.google.com to ... Allow it to what? I don't know. I'm not proud of it, but I clicked allow because I was expecting it to request permission to use my camera, and I couldn't proceed without that. And if the page serving my Google account was compromised, I probably have bigger problems than access to my phone's camera. But I think this illustrates a point that attackers can find interesting ways to hide their intent, even when there are security measures in place. So to recap the SameSite Strict limitations that we've gone over today, the first one was manually navigating to a URL in the browser address bar. The second method is when the system opens a URL with the default browser. The third method was that Google Chrome PDF viewer middle click bug, which is now fixed. And the fourth method is using a custom application protocol to pass a link to the default browser. I think that's the most interesting method since it can be triggered from another site with minimal user interaction. So key takeaways, what can developers do about this? Well, it's important to know the limitations of security measures that you rely on so you can take the necessary precautions. And there are a few recommendations that I'd have for anyone looking to protect their application against CSRF. The first is adding a CSRF token to state-changing requests. A CSRF token is an additional value that you have to manually attach to a request to authorize it. This is specifically not a cookie, since you don't want the browser to automatically attach it to requests. It can be an additional header or contained in the request body, and it tells your server that this request was sent from your application and not a cross-site request. The second important thing to do is to verify HTTP methods and only accept the intended method for an endpoint. And most importantly, to not use safe HTTP methods such as GET to process any state-changing requests. Should always be very intentional with which method you're accepting. Even if it might seem like it doesn't matter, there's security measures in place for safe methods that if you use them unsafely will just open you up to other vulnerabilities. And third, even though we were discussing some limitations of same-site attribute, you should still use all applicable security attributes for cookies because they do offer significant protection against most attacks. And a couple other things you can do are to check origin and referrer headers, since those are automatically added by the browser. You can reject requests that do not match your site, but you should never rely on these headers to approve a request because they could be spoofed by an attacker. They're primarily useful to know if your legitimate user is being tricked into doing something through their browser. And one more protection you can implement is to re-authenticate your user before processing sensitive actions, ideally with multi-factor authentications. This can be annoying for users, but if it is a critical piece of functionality, it might be worth implementing. And I want to reiterate that defense in depth approach is best. There are several layers of security that you can build up, and the chances of gaps in all those layers lining up can be mitigated. And that's it. Any questions? Yeah.
This only applies to get
correct.
options with state-changing requests. What if you're doing a regular get when your intent is to dump the whole content from the database, so you have some kind of regular get request that does a query?
Yeah.
You use the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. So. Pardon me? Oh, yes. So yeah, the question, if I heard right, was if you could use these methods to abuse other endpoints that accept GET requests, or yeah. So anything that accepts GET request with data in URL parameters, you'd be able to use these methods. So, and that can happen quite often where there's some sort of we showed it with a banking application with some intentional functionality, but CSRF can also be used by attackers to target your application and exploit vulnerabilities that are only available to access by authenticated users. So that usually requires a little more background knowledge to actually be able to exploit things like that. But CSRF can definitely be used if your website has this kind of misconfiguration. It exposes tons of additional attack surface to attackers if they're able to take over one of your legitimate users' sessions. So did I answer the question, or does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Yeah.
What inspired you to go digging into this, and how did you find it?
What inspired me? Honestly, I can't really remember how it started. I work as doing security research and identifying these types of vulnerabilities, and I think I was trying to exploit a CSRF vulnerability in a website that I was, or for a product I was working on, and I think I was just it was set with SameSite Strict, and I was just wondering, what are the limitations of this? Like, is there any weird way that you can get around this? And then I saw that there was some research about the internal redirects within the site, but then I noticed that if I just paste the link in directly to the browser, it also includes that cookie. So then at that point, I started kind of poking around a little more. I found the thing where it opens, where the system default browser opening a page includes same-site cookies, and then because of that, links within another application used them. And at that point, I was just kind of randomly, like on a hunch, testing the different browsers' PDF viewers, because I figured it's different enough of a functionality that they might process requests differently. And I wasn't necessarily expecting it to work, but I was between jobs at the time, so I had a little bit of spare time on my hands, and I was just kind of playing around with Chrome, and I found that the middle click included the request. And I only really noticed that because I had this little demo site that I was playing around with where I could quickly see when that request was being attached. And I just noticed like one request had it, and I was like, oh, that should be impossible. So I did some digging. Yeah.
How was that bug rated?
I think they scored it they paid $2,000 for it, which I was pretty happy with. I think they scored it as a low, but the CVSS rating for it was a medium.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, Google, they actually pay pretty well for bounties. In that same patch, the patch notes for when my bug was fixed, there was actually someone else that made $70,000 on their report. But they have a pretty streamlined process. You just put together a little like a little proposal that shows what your bug is and any evidence you have for it, and explain why you think it's a threat. So I put together a little sample application, sent it over, and explained how it could be abused. For instance, if you embedded that PDF document within an iframe on another page, and then they have an internal team that evaluates the severity, and they assign it an internal scoring based on the actual risk. And then they also, when they issue a CVE, which stands for, what does it stand for? Common Vulnerabilities Enumeration. I want to say that's what it is, but I also feel like that might be off. Okay, anyways. Yeah, so when they assign a CVE, it's scored with the CVSS framework, which probably stands for Common Vulnerability Scoring System, if I had to guess. And that's just uses a series of attributes for how bad the impact of this could be in a worst case scenario, and assigns a value from 0 to 10. And I think it was like around a 4 or something, which was just breaking into the medium category. Yeah, no, that's what one of my colleagues said. He's probably the most expensive middle click he's ever seen.
Any other questions? With that patched, the other threats
Yes.
still exist.
Yes, so exactly. So that one in Google no longer is a threat if your victims are, or if your users, I think of them as victims because I try to think of ways to attack them, but if your users are using a vulnerable version of Chrome from before this past August, then they could still be affected. But most people on an up-to-date version, that's not a threat. But yes, the other methods that I talked about, the first two are kind of just built into how these same-site cookies are intentionally handled from a design perspective. And then the last one, the fourth one, using Steam or some other application protocol to trigger that from a browser, just follows logically. So I personally believe that at the very least, the system default browser shouldn't necessarily include same-site strict cookies. I think it makes sense that if it's coming from a different application, it's kind of hard to trust that that's the same context as the intended website, especially with the way tons of applications will process links, and then you have content in different places. You have a Discord application, a Slack application, all serving this in that communicating with your browser through the system. So it could open the door to that kind of abuse.
And this is where my knowledge of JavaScript programming hits a wall. Would that vulnerable site or that phishing site you go to, would it be possible to write JavaScript in there to actually modify the address bar to kick open the default browser?
I don't believe so, no. So the link that I had was to, what's it called, just the Steam page. You could redirect someone to a user, to a link like this, where it has to go through that other application. But I don't believe there's any way for JavaScript to interact outside of the tab that it's in and tell the browser to type something into the URL bar and perform an action that's outside of the context of that page.
Or what about within that page? So
within that page, so yeah, you can redirect someone to this link right away. And so in my in this other page,
because the goal is to actually mimic typing. Okay, I'm in this. I've gone to this phishing page. I've got JavaScript within that page. It's now going to change the address bar.
It can redirect the user, but the browsers are smart enough that they'll identify that as a cross-site request. So if I just had a web page, I mean, I can kind of show this here. You're probably not going to be able to read any of this. But if you just redirect the user, you can't actually type in the address bar. I'm talking and trying to write different things at the same time. It's not working. So if you redirect the user using the window.location.href property, that's just the browser treats that as a cross-site request because it identifies the origin of this request as coming from this page. So yeah, all the JavaScript is running within the context of that page, and your browser is smart enough to figure out that that should have that origin assigned to it.
Unless there's a browser bug.
If there could be a browser bug, yeah, you'd probably get more than I got if you found something that did that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there the same behavior with all the redirect codes? Like, have you fiddled with that and share multiple redirect codes, right?
Yes, so it's actually kind of tricky. So in order for a redirect to actually include same-site cookies, it needs to be a client-side redirect, meaning it's processed within JavaScript on that page. So if you send someone to a redirect page that's just like a 301 redirect with a location header, I believe that doesn't actually include SameSite Strict cookies because your browser is smart enough to say that you originally came from that other site, and then even though you were redirected, that redirect page isn't the source. So that was another reason why I was trying to find ways around that redirect vulnerability because it's not completely reliable for all redirects. It's only a specific class of redirects. Yes?
Java, what about pushing history, and then having the browser go back? Has that been tested?
I don't believe I have tested that actually. We can try it. So, okay. Yeah. Do you know how to do that off the top of your head, or?
So, real quick, the Java would be history.pushState, and then the state object title, URL.
Do I still have this here? Okay, I do have that. So, okay. So we're loaded, we're on our different website, and we are logged in here. So, okay, history.pushState, and then just the URL for the, what was the other argument it needs?
State object, and then title.
Title. Okay, and then how can I,
And then
do you know how to trigger the back? Maybe just history.back. No, that didn't do anything. This could be where, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask while we're.
If you're on the internet, you probably can let the internet know that they've got questions.
Yes, the internet, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Where are we going to get those? There are none. Okay, yeah. So we'll hear if you have any. Hello.
I wonder, do you think that
I guess if I can ask a question, did that all make sense to everyone, or did it kind of not? I know it's a pretty narrow topic, but it's, okay. People seem happy enough, so that's good. I do not think so. No, I think they should at the very least use their Steam browser. There is like a browser within the Steam client. I wasn't actually sure why they exposed this functionality, because I was trying to find stuff like this in other application protocols where I was hoping to find it like through Slack or Teams or something. And I can, yeah, you can see why you wouldn't want to offer that.
There's a use case in mobile devices where if you want to load up your app based on an URL, so you clicked on something in Blue Sky to go to a web page, and it redirects, it opens up.
Yeah, definitely. So using your own application.
You can register your protocol to associate with a different app.
And definitely opening a specific app makes a lot of sense, but I thought it was odd that Steam.
Well, actually, sorry, it may be because of games that are launched by Steam wind up with some of your actual default browser to authenticate something within the game. That it could be something like that.
No, that didn't work.
Because otherwise it is all.
any other folks with Java? Do you have any other questions?
Yeah. I did try that, and I was really trying to find a way that I could trigger that interaction through JavaScript within like an iframe and communicate with the PDF document within that. I wasn't able to find a way to do that, and PDF doesn't, as far as I know, it doesn't it doesn't handle JavaScript directly within that frame. Yeah, SVG definitely does handle JavaScript. That's actually a fun cross-site scripting payload I've got a few people with. Yeah, of course.
I was going to say, instead of middle clicking or control clicking, what about shift?
Does that also just open in a new tab? Let me go back here and let's find out. So we're still logged. Wait, are we still logged in? Yes, we are still logged in. Shift click.
But that's within an iframe.
That does work, yes.
Hey!
Well, it did work before they fixed it. I hope. You never know. Could go try that out.
Do you have a fixed version?
I do have, yeah. I can just use the current Chrome.
So anything that we develop out of this goes to the food bank, right? While we're live,
We can log in as Alice.
maybe that's a future event, is have sort of like a hacking group where we choose one bounty, and whatever is generated goes
Yeah,
to
probably
the
more.
charity of your choice, like sending Portugal.
So yeah, this is the current version of Chrome, and if we open that with a middle click, it does not work. But if we command click, also doesn't work, and shift click, you know what? Shift click works. So, I'm pretty sure this is the patch version. I'll have to do some research.
So somebody on the internet watching the
I'm-
live stream.
Yeah, there's a chance I get in trouble for this, isn't there?
Any other questions? That was any other questions? Well,
Somebody's still trying, I can hear that.
one more. I was gonna say, when you were working on finding a vulnerability like that, or is it just something that you came across one day and you was like, oh, I should probably just go see if I can fix it or just report it or something?
So at the time I was working at IBM as an ethical hacker, doing like penetration testing on IBM security products. And so I was like interacting with a lot of web applications and finding ways to exploit things like this. And yeah, like one of the things we'd come up against is browser protections quite a bit, because a lot of the times developers will put in place these kind of half-baked measures, and they'll assume that they're just safe from these methods, or from these types of attacks. So I was kind of trying to find interesting ways that that might not always be true.
With respect to the overloading gets with state-changing operations, REST came about
Yes.
later, but even though there were all these great verbs to do things with HTTP, so many what we'll call now legacy apps will just get
Definitely,
everything.
yeah.
So you probably have a better chance on legacy apps. They're still trying. Better chance to attack the overloaded gets on legacy apps.
Yeah, probably. There's so that's like, yeah, that's a very common issue with like older frameworks that aren't like, a lot of these protections aren't even that old too. Like SameSite has only been implemented in browsers since about 2016, I believe. So at least SameSite Strict, I'm pretty.
I think the attributes is more recent than
The SameSite attribute.
SameSite attribute, I think, is older. I think the
Maybe just the
ability,
strict,
the strict,
or maybe it was changing the default.
The default from none to lax has changed fairly recently. Just years.
because I remember SameSite being around before.
It's a nice reminder, like why it matters to you, right? These are the common things that are being.
Pre-2016.
CSR token used to be hard to implement. That's like a big issue.
Yeah,
And
so.
a lot of people just skip that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's kind of the thing now, is a lot of people are like annoyed with CSRF tokens, and they think maybe SameSite Strict would solve all their problems. And it would solve most of your problems if you do everything else correctly. But the problem is if you make this one mistake and open up a GET request, then it can be dangerous. Yeah, default behaviors changed in 2020. I saw something that the SameSite attribute was from 2016, but I could be wrong. Anyways, but all that to say that yes, legacy applications and frameworks often do have vulnerabilities like that, far more.
Well, what do you think, folks? Should we invite them?
Yeah, let's assume that you had to write a fix for that. Your app relies on an authentication cookie.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the workaround in the code to check the?
Well, so it kind of depends. A lot of frameworks have some sort of implementation in place to handle CSRF, because it can be a bit of a pain to set up properly. But I mean, other things that you can do kind of in the interim is if it depends on what your application is trying to do. For instance, if you're just communicating with an API, you don't actually need to use a cookie. You can use an authorization header, which is a header that you attach manually to requests. So that way the browser will never do that on its own. So that kind of solves does the same, it gives you a lot of the same protection as a CSRF token, in that it's not something that can be abused within the user's browser automatically. I think ideally the best protection is to use a cookie and a CSRF token or an authorization header. And my reasoning for that is kind of outside the scope of this talk. I talked about the HTTP only attribute briefly earlier. What that means is that JavaScript can't access a cookie value. And the reason that's important is that if you have a cookie and JavaScript can read it, then if there's a cross-site scripting vulnerability in the website, which is when there's HTML that's injected into the page through some user input and then gets rendered in your user's browser, it can trigger some JavaScript to execute. And if that JavaScript can read their cookie, it would be able to pull the cookie value and send it directly to the attacker, where they can use it kind of at their own leisure. Cross-site scripting is still really bad, even if even if the attacker can't read the session token, because the attacker can still just trigger any actions within the browser. So it doesn't eliminate the risk of cross-site scripting. It just helps you to achieve the same level of protection that the HTTP only attribute gives you with respect to cookies. So that's why I'd say that it's best to have some manual step to attach some piece of data to the request to authorize it, as well as using cookies, which take it out of the hands of your JavaScript that's running in the client and kind of give the browser one part of that.
What are your thoughts on fixing it on the browser side? The reason I ask is having done a little bit of development work, making intentional CSRF tokens can really break functionality sometimes. Like if you're a link hoarder like I am to try and test functionality, it'll reject my request because I don't have the token. What about solving it in the browser level? Like really?
So yeah, it's kind of, the problem is that the first couple of issues that I talked about, like the ones that haven't been patched, I guess the Chrome one hasn't been patched either. But the issue with those like vulnerabilities is that that's how same-site cookies were designed to operate. So like you want your user when they navigate to this URL to be able to see that page authenticated. I mean, like the security part of me says that you should probably not even include them on those requests, and then you should handle a redirect within your own website if you do trust the request. So that way you can funnel all incoming requests to your homepage, and then and then you can assign the same-site cookies based after that. But I mean, that kind of gets a little bit difficult for users and for other like developers to implement properly, and they might kind of get annoyed with it. You don't want to make some security restrictions so oppressive that people end up not using them because it is bad for the user experience. We already see a little bit of that with like MFA fatigue, where people are kind of annoyed with having to switch between their phone and this and their email just to log into like the Cineplex app. And it's you need to find a balance where that doesn't push users away from the secure behavior. So I guess, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Rambled
it's
a bit.
sort of that reflective thought on are cookies still the right thing, considering how old they are?
Yeah, so yeah, well, which is, and that's where proper design comes into place so importantly, because it really shows you why you need to treat safe requests with like a different scope than you handle unsafe requests. Because if you expose any functionality through safe requests, then these requests are intentionally left a little bit less secure because they're meant to not handle that kind of those kind of endpoints. And so that really just goes to show how like you need to very intentionally allow HTTP methods for a specific endpoint. And yeah, like modern frameworks do this very well. Like when I was setting up my demo application, I had to go a bit out of my way to actually get it to behave this way. But it can still happen by accident in various frameworks, or you might just set it up this way because you want to handle a form, you want to serve the form on the same page that it submits to, or something like that. And then if you're improperly handling the arguments that come in, then you might also process an argument that's in the URL parameter instead of in the request body. So yeah, in terms of like how browsers should better fix it, the Chrome one was a vulnerability, but I think they could maybe revisit how they're attached to cookies or to requests as a whole. But I do understand why they designed it the way that they did as well.
What do you think, folks? Should we have Vincent back?
All right, well, thank you all very much.
For Vincent. So we did it. Another OWASP monthly meetup. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. As we mentioned, this was streamed on the internet. Somebody has already raced to submit that vulnerability to the bug bounty program. So maybe if we all pile on, we'll get to split it. So our YouTube page is where this talk and all of the previous OWASP Ottawa chapter meetups are streamed. So if you want to find some other historic talks that we've done, that's the place that you're going to go. Expect to find us back here, probably in this room, if not on the 5th floor, 3rd Wednesday. It will be the 5th floor next month?
No, I just thought of something else.
Oh, one more thing, Colombo. So we'll expect to be here 3rd week of next month on Wednesday. Find us on our Slack. Please join us in our Slack community. There is some change underway with the OWASP organization as far as websites and meetup, and we don't want to lose contact. So until the end of the month, owasp.org/Ottawa, you can find all of our connections there. Garth has one more thing he would like to say.
So this 2026 is OWASP's 25th anniversary. So we've been fixing the same dumb crap for 25 years. But they're quite pleased at being 25 years old. They haven't wrapped Daddy's Lamborghini around a tree yet, but they're deciding that they're going to choose 11 chapters from the over 270 chapters internationally, and each month, one of the selected 11 chapters will have their month, and they will throw a party. Out of the world, they chose OWASP Ottawa as one of those 11. So now I'm on the hook to plan a party. So we chose, because we like to have time to plan, we chose October. So bring your own costume. So I'll go as a middle-aged nerd.
I'll go as a cookie.
So expect some kind of discussion on whatever medias we have about what our plans are going to be for October. There will be, the baseline is a party, just because. But we're thinking about other things on that same day as well. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Very exciting. A party in October. Put it on your calendars. Well, with that, we'll send you out into the snow. I hope you have boots and brushes for your cars and what have you. And we'll see you back here next month. Thank you all very much.